So, we are moving to the next module of knowledge management. After discussing about knowledge capturing process, now we are moving to the next module, that is knowledge codification. So, first of all we will talk about knowledge codification, and then we will talk about the system development and how it is going to be tested and deployed, so that we are able to store knowledge, and finally then we will move to discuss about knowledge transfer and knowledge sharing. Now, the first thing that we are going to discuss here is knowledge codification. So, in the last session you remember we talked about how to capture knowledge using various tools and techniques. So, once knowledge is captured, that is to be codified, that is that knowledge has to be presented in a structured format. That what I mean to say is that a codified knowledge is highly organized and represented. So, what needs to be done, that codification is basically the process through which the knowledge is represented and organized in a form, so that people can have access to it. Okay. So, when I am talking about codification, it is nothing else but organizing and representing knowledge before it is accessed by people in the organization. Now, organizing part, that is the first part, that how we are going to organize captured knowledge, okay, is presented in the form of a decision tree or a decision table or a frame, that we will talk about. Then we will also see that how we are going to convert tacit knowledge into explicit form, because codification is nothing else but converting tacit knowledge into explicit form, so that people can use it. Now, that is nothing else but how we are going to put something that is not documented to in a documented format, okay. That is tacit to explicit. And then we have to see that how we can organize it in the sense that people in the organization can have access to it, they are able to see it, okay, use it for taking certain decisions or doing their work. Okay. So, after defining knowledge codification, if you look at the system life cycle which we had discussed earlier, is that once knowledge is captured, this part, then we move to the next stage, that is knowledge codification. Now, in the case of knowledge codification, we have to see that how it is to be done. We create cells, tables, decision trees, tools, maps, we follow certain rules. So, that is how knowledge is codified. So, we are going to concentrate right now on this part, then we move to testing and deployment, and this testing and deployment helps us to see that it is possible to access knowledge or share knowledge. For testing and development, basically what we do, we try to see that use certain rules, that it is logically tested to make it valid, it is accepted by the users, okay, and users and those who are going to have it, access it, are trained to use it. So, basically here we are going to talk about more about knowledge codification process, and then we will move to these processes, right. So, this is the codification in the system life cycle. So, we start with capturing, that we have already talked about it, how knowledge is created, okay. So, that is the database. Now, this database is basically nothing else but it is in the form of explicit knowledge, but this explicit knowledge need to be codified for access and use, and that is why we go for organizing and structuring knowledge into a format, so that people have access to it and can use it. Otherwise, this database is not going to be used unless it is going to be organized into a meaningful way. Okay. So, we are moving to this process, that why there is a need to codify knowledge. Okay. Now, if you look at the KM system, you are capturing knowledge, that is either through observations or experience or interviews or whatever process that you are going to identify. So, it is important to codify knowledge for access and use of it. So, the first thing is that you have to do is that why you are going to do it, why you need to codify knowledge, and there are certain things that is discussed in the 4 points that 4 or 5 points that we are going to talk about is diagnosis, instruction and training, interpretation, planning and scheduling, and prediction. Okay. So, if you talk about KM system, is nothing else but it is a given identifiable information. Okay. It means that you have been able to capture the information through the user's observations or experiences. Okay. So, now the question is that how we are going to address these identifiable symptoms of specific causal factors, that how this particular thing is related to a particular event. So, basically you try to see that okay, this knowledge that you have identified is going to be useful for what. So, for that need you need to codify, because unless you codify and put it into a domain, a specific domain or area of knowledge, it is not going to be very useful. So, you need to identify and organize or what you call classify knowledge, so that you can relate it with the events. Now, another important point is that you have to promote your people, not only senior people, but also junior people. So, you need to provide training, so that the junior staff based on capture knowledge is able to make use of it, that is captured from the senior people. So, you are going to capture knowledge from the senior people, and then you need to train people down the line, so that they can make use of it, but they would be able to make use of it only when it is codified into some form, because unless it is codified, I mean the observations, the experiences or the processes, it may not be possible for younger people to make use of that, and they also need to be trained that how they are going to do it. So, that is where the training is required. Then how are we going to interpret codified knowledge? Okay. So, you need to develop a system for interpretation, okay. And then you have to use a standard process, okay, because unless you use a standard process, it may not be possible for you to make use of it. Say for example, you may be having books, okay, but the books may belong to different areas of knowledge. It relate to mechanical engineering, relate to management, even in management it could be related to a different field, and that is where you need to specify that whether the present knowledge conforms to the present standards of knowledge, which is classified and organized, so that you can add to that existing body of knowledge. So, it is very important to codify the interpret the codifying knowledge, right, and that helps you to compare it with the present standard of classification and organization. Now, next is planning and scheduling, that is how we are going to map out the entire course of action before any other steps are taken. It talks about how do you go about codifying the knowledge. So, what are the various steps and processes that you need to follow in order to codify. That talks about the route that is to be followed in order to plan and schedule regarding codification of the knowledge. And then finally, the prediction. Okay. Prediction is nothing else but how we are going to infer something out of it, okay, so that it gives you information. Let me give an example to explain it. Suppose you are going to use or codify certain knowledge, and you are going to compare it with the standards. Now, say for example, a boiler. So, a boiler is going to work, and you know that if a boiler is going to work above a temperature or below a temperature, it is not going to be functional. So, what you do? You have created a standard, and you are going to ensure that your boiler follows that standards when it is going to function effectively. Okay. That is okay. So, that is basically you are talking about the interpretation. So, you are going to see that okay, a standard temperature is to be followed by the boiler in order to work effectively. Now, you also need to see that if the boiler is not functioning effectively, what is to be done. Okay. So, you create a system or incorporate a system that if the temperature falls below that standard or goes above that standard, you come to know about it. So, what you can do, you can incorporate a system, a warning system or a sensor or anything which gives you information that the temperature of the boiler is either below standard or above standard. So, it is not going to function effectively. So, the idea is to develop a system to infer the likely out of a given situation, so that you will be able to know whether it is working or not, okay. And then also having a proper warning system or for taking corrective action. So, suppose boiler is not working properly, the temperature has gone above. So, whatever corrective actions is to be done or taken, you take it okay, so that you can correct the problem. Now, if you look at this codification process, there are a lot of bottlenecks which comes out, and these bottlenecks create barrier in the process of codification. Now, look at this, the knowledge dimensions are discussed, and along with knowledge dimensions, if you look at the peripheral factors, okay, these basically create bottlenecks. The bottlenecks are that, say for example, knowledge is not shared. Okay. There is a tendency among the people not to share knowledge, but to hoard it. So, if you are not going to share the knowledge, how are you going to capture or forget about codification? So, it is very important to ensure that knowledge is shared by the people. Okay. At the same time, how are you going to diffuse this new knowledge? Okay. Many places it has been found that the speed of diffusion of the new knowledge is very slow. So, that way it is not going to be effective. So, what you need to do is that the new knowledge must reach to the people, so that they can make use of it. Okay. Now, another important issue is related to what you call source of knowledge. People in the organization do not know where is the source, where the knowledge resides. So, they know that there is knowledge, but they do not know exactly where the source, where the knowledge is. So, the idea of having a knowledge management system is to ensure and have a place for knowledge management system. Okay. And then you have to see that how you are going to access recorded knowledge. Unless you are able to codify the knowledge, it would be very difficult for you to access the knowledge, because there are a number of things that is associated, which is discussed especially in the inner circle of knowledge dimension. Now, if you look at the inner circle of the knowledge dimension, it talks about a number of factors like form, which is basically is related to what you call in what form the knowledge is available. Okay. Because if it is not available in a highly organized and structured form, probably you will have difficulty in accessing the knowledge, and that is one purpose of codifying the knowledge. So, you have to ensure that knowledge is codified in a proper form. Then location, that is where the knowledge is. So, you have to see that you have a system and people know where the knowledge is, so that they can have access to the system to identify the knowledge. Then time. Now, time factor is very, very important. Getting a knowledge when it is required is very, very important. If you do not get information or knowledge that is relevant to you when you are going to work, probably it may not be useful to you. You have to show that you have timely access. So, if you are going for a highly organized system and have a good knowledge management system, probably it helps you to access information as and when it is required. Okay. And another point that I already talked about is knowledge not shared. If knowledge is not shared, then it is very difficult to capture and codify it. Okay. So, these are some of the factors which are related to what you call bottlenecks, and that is why you need to ensure that knowledge is located in a particular place, it is available whenever it is required, people share their knowledge, it is available in a form that is understood by the people, that it means that it is available in a highly organized form, okay, and people do not have any kind of problem in accessing the knowledge. Right. Now, we are moving to another aspect, part of it we have already talked about. You remember we talked about tacit and explicit knowledge, and how we are going to transform tacit to tacit knowledge, and we have talked about it, like how to move from tacit to tacit, and that is more personalized strategy for knowledge management. Okay. And when you are moving from tacit to tacit, means that it is being transferred from one person to another person, or from members of the team, okay, or from one person to a team. Basically, this happens through the process of socialization, when people interact and relate formally and informally with each other. When going to observe others doing certain things, then you try to internalize it and then try to act upon that. It means that you model that and then try to imitate those processes yourself. That is what we know as observations, and then practice. Once you observe it, then you try to adopt those practices. Okay. So, observation is modeling and then imitating those things, and that is how you also internalize that knowledge. So, that is mean that is basically related to tacit transfer. Now, tacit to explicit is then when you go from internalizing we are moving to externalizing. Okay. Externalizing, that using analogies, metaphors. Okay, if this is the thing that will happen, then you try to use the same analogy, okay, in another context. And then this explicit knowledge is stored in the repositories, okay, which you have access. Okay. So, from tacit to explicit means you know about it and then you go for documentation. So, suppose you know about certain things, that how it is to be done, and then the entire process is documented by you. So, what you do, you move from internalization to externalization, right, and that is how the knowledge is transformed from tacit to explicit form. The next thing is explicit to tacit. Okay. Explicit to tacit, that okay, from externalizing to internalizing, that is you are going to internalize explicit knowledge. For example, you have read that how to write a program in a textbook, or you have watched a video on how to write a program, and then whatever you have read or watched in a video about writing a program, you use it in order to write a program for a purpose, right. It means that whatever you have learned, you are going to internalize that, and you are learning from explicit sources. So, whatever you are going to learn from explicit sources, maybe books, maybe videos, okay, or manuals and guidelines, and then you make use of it doing certain things, and that is what we call internalizing explicit knowledge into tacit form. Then explicit to explicit, it means you are going to see that how explicit knowledge that you have is used by you in doing certain things, okay, and that is where you can also use different kind of explicit knowledge. It means that you are using different sources of explicit knowledge. Suppose you want to write a program, so you write a book, you ask a consultant, you also write the look at the video. It means these are the different sources of explicit knowledge, and then you combine these explicit sources of knowledge related to a particular question or problem, and then you make use of it based on a combination of this knowledge from different sources, and then you make use of it to do the job. So, there are different modes of conversions that takes place in different level. Now, what are the things that we need to consider before we go for codifications? Okay. Now, it is very important that what kind of knowledge is being codified is very important. Are you going to codify each and every knowledge, whether it is related to routine tasks or non-routine tasks, whether you are going to codify the knowledge that is available with the experts, okay, or you are going to codify all sort of knowledge that is being created. Now, the thing is that any knowledge that needs to be codified has to be relevant, has a utility, means that people are going to make use of it to perform their job in order to achieve their goals and objectives. So, the most important thing that one need to consider is that how this codified knowledge is going to help you to achieve the goals and objectives of the organization. Any kind of codified knowledge that is available in explicit form will help you to do it only when it helps you to do the job. It means that it is relevant and it is going to be applicable in a particular context, and that is why it is important to codify especially those non-routine tasks for which there is no straight jacketed approach is available, where there is no fixed rule to do it, because most cases we are not going to codify explicit knowledge, because that is already available in some documented form, it is organized, but most cases we are going to codify tacit knowledge. Okay. So, it is important to capture those tacit knowledge which is important, which is available with the experts, whether it is related to tasks, whether it is related to processes or anything, so that it helps you to achieve the goals and objectives of the organization by performing effectively. So, when you do your job using that knowledge, definitely you achieve your goals and objectives, and in the process you also contribute to the goals and objectives of the organization. Now, what knowledge exists in the organization that addresses these goals? You have to see what type of knowledge is available with the organization, whether it is explicit or whether it is tacit. and whether the explicit knowledge that is available is good enough. If it is not, then you need to go for creating new knowledge that would be required of the organization. So, in the process you also need to identify the gap in the knowledge base. We have already talked about the knowledge gap. So, the first point, if you look at goals and objectives, the knowledge serve, basically you are trying to link your KM strategy with corporate strategy. It must be aligned and help to fulfill in the goals and objectives of the organization. If you look at the second point, it talks about the gap in the knowledge base. What is the current knowledge base that is present with the organization now, and what kind of knowledge base would be required by the organization, and whether this knowledge management system is going to address this gap or not. In the sense that you need to identify the gap in the current state of knowledge and required state of knowledge. So, you identify the gap, and your knowledge management strategy should be to fulfill bridge this gap between your current state of knowledge and future state of knowledge. So, now the third point is how useful is existing knowledge for codification, whether whatever knowledge that is available with the organization is there a need to codify it, how codification is going to be helped. It depends upon two parameters that you have to see that it is applicable, okay, and people are going to use it. Now, the last question is that talks about the process, that how are we going to codify the knowledge. Once you have captured the knowledge, there are different ways and means through which we are going to codify the knowledge. So, the next thing that we are going to discuss is related to the codification process. Now, what are the issues that come out with the codification, and especially codification of the tacit knowledge, because explicit knowledge need not be codified, because it is already available in explicit form, and it is in terms of documents, books, videos, whatever it is, right. So, you have to see that when you capture knowledge, that tacit knowledge that is to be captured, how you are going to codify. Are you going to use certain formula, rules of logic? Okay. So, what we need to see is that in order to codify tacit knowledge, what are the various problems that may come up. Okay. So, you have to consider the style of the experts. You remember we talked about 4 different type of style, whether it is emphasizing on process or methods or contents, okay, or is trying to market it, right, or is trying to explain. So, depending upon the distinctive style of the expert that we have already covered in the last lecture, like procedural type, content type, storyteller type, or salesperson type. So, these are the different types of experts. Now, we have to see that these different distinctive styles of expert will provide knowledge in a different way. So, capturing and codifying this kind of knowledge is very, very important. Okay. So, you have to develop as a knowledge developer those skills to codify tacit knowledge depending upon the experts and their style. Okay. So, certain knowledge is more of an art than a science, and art is difficult to codify. That is, if you look at knowledge part, not necessarily that all knowledge is going to be technical, okay, because technical knowledge codification is easy compared to how to do certain things, that is art. Okay. When it comes to application of knowledge in performing certain activities, that is related to an art. So, when it comes to processes, okay, it is related to art. So, codifying processes are more difficult than codifying techniques or the equipments or how to use these things. Okay. Then another important issue, if you remember, we talked about what kind of relationship you develop with the experts, how you get information from them, what are the various tools that you use. Okay. Because in order to elicit tacit information from experts, you have to interact with them, you have to relate with them, you need to talk to them, you need to interview them, or you are going to use other methods that we have talked about, like going for observations, okay, or having certain tools of decision making like nominal groups or Delphi or other things when you are dealing with multiple experts. So, when you are going to deal with multiple experts, what you need to remember is that the basic objective of a knowledge developer is to elicit the tacit knowledge and codify it. So, it is very very important. It depends upon the personality attributes of the person, personal characteristics and his understandings in terms of his skills, both behavioral and technical, which is going to help him to deal with the experts. Okay. Now, lack of transparency of company wide knowledge. Now, what I am trying to tell you is very clear, that how transparent you are when you are going to deal with the knowledge. What I mean to say here is, in terms of transparency, whether the knowledge is available to all, whether some people are going to deal with it, or whether everybody is going to have access to it. Okay. So, these are some of the issues related to it. Okay. Then coming to critical knowledge, not all knowledge is critical, especially knowledge related to non-routine tasks are more critical. Okay. But critical knowledge is not available so easily, because it may reside with few people only. Okay. And though we say that okay, it is available, but where it is available, that you have to find out, and sometimes critical knowledge is not shared, that is another issue that is there. So, if it is not shared, then it is very difficult to capture and codify it. So, these are some of the issues related to this. Now, coming to the codification process, we use certain tech tools and techniques for this purpose, and one that we are going to discuss now is identifying knowledge maps. So, knowledge maps are nothing else, but it is a representation at how to go about identifying or moving from tacit to explicit. Okay. So, basically it is going to help you to guide that okay, how we move from tacit to explicit, what are the processes, and here actually we try to see that how we are going to identify the gap in the knowledge at the first stage. So, if you remember, we also talked about it, that how we are going to identify the gap in the knowledge, and that is possible only when you find out what is your current state of knowledge and where you want to have. Okay. And then you have to identify where is the gap. Okay. So, identify strengths to exploit and missing knowledge gaps. Okay. So, that you can fill those knowledge gaps. Then it is very very important to have a visual representation. Okay. Because visual representations help you to better understand and memorize that compared to a repository, because if knowledge is available in a repository, people may or may not look it. Okay. If it is in other form, probably it will not create the kind of impression that it should have, and that is why it is always good to have a visual representation of knowledge, because that helps you to understand in a better way. Okay. And then you have to see that how people are going to make use of different kind of explicit knowledge, that is documents, repositories and other kind of things. Okay. And then you also need a system to communicate people that okay, this is where you can find out the knowledge. Okay. And then you have to see that the explicit and tacit knowledge that is being captured is documented, okay, which is there in the with the people. Okay. Now, how it works? You have to go for a visual representation of a particular business issue or problem. Then you go for collaborative discussions guided by questions to create shared knowledge from the experts. Then this fact is presented to the experts, that is the group, to focus on the relatives. Okay, this is how we are going to solve the problem. And then this nature of collaborative discussion among peers should be an open environment facilitated by a coach, so that to come out very clearly. Okay, these are the things, or these are the things that has come out of the process. Okay. Then after the session completes, okay, you go for review and conclude. Okay, this is what has come out, and then you try to represent it into a visual map. Okay, thank you.